Good afternoon, everyone. I, Harshal Desai, part of editorial team at Elit's Technomedia Private Limited, welcome you all to World Education Summit. As you all must be aware, World Education Summit is one of the prominent conference that we organize every year, and we have been organizing the conference across the country when the situation was normal. And in the times of Corona, we have been able to organize World Education Summit couple of editions virtually. I thank all the panelists who have agreed to join today in this panel discussion and share their opinion and their views on a very important subject, which is new education policy 2020 approaches, opportunities, and challenges. I, Harshal Desai, once again on behalf of Digital Learning Magazine and Elets Technomedia Private Limited, welcome you all. And I welcome all the audience which are watching us live at this moment on our social media platforms. So I would like to take 1 minute to introduce all the panelists to the audience so that they should be able to understand who are all going to speak in this panel discussion today. We have with us Mr. Dr. Ashok Pandey, Director, uh, Alcon Group of Schools, New Delhi. Welcome, Dr. Ashok Pandey, in this panel discussion. I
Thank you.
also welcome Mr. Aniruddha Khaitan, Vice Chairman, Khaitan Public School, Ghaziabad. Thank you so much, Mr. Khaitan, for joining us. We have with us Ms. Rita Singh, Director, Indirapuram Group of Institutes, Ghaziabad. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. And we also have Dr. M. Mohan, Founder, Managing Trustee, and Correspondent, SSVM Institutions, uh, Metropolitan. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. We will have Lieutenant General Surendra Kulkarni, retired Director, Mayo College Residential, Ajmer, and Ms. Divya Lal, Founder and Managing Director, Flip Learn Education Private Limited, also joining us in some time. Once again, welcome to everyone. The subject is very important. Everyone is talking about it. New Education Policy 2020. What are the pros? What are the cons? Challenges, scopes, and opportunities. Uh, on this particular subject, I will do the maximum, I'll do the minimum talking because we have the experts here with us who understand the policy very well, who understand the challenge, understand the scope related to education policy. I would like to go to Dr. Ashok Pandey first. I'll request him to share his opening remark in about 3 to 4 minutes on this very significant subject.
Okay,
Dr.
Harshit. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Also, I'm delighted to be in the company of people I love and admire and respect. In 3 to 4 minutes, in this opening remark, let me only list 5 challenges, or what I call they constitute the soul of the national education policy. I will tell them very briefly. Number one, is stated in para 5.1 is about high respect for the teachers and the status of teaching as a profession and what can be done to bring the best minds in the teaching profession. So that is number one. Number two is 1.1 para, which suggests the high quality education for early childhood care and education. Now, this is a far reaching inclusion in the policy because it is going to impact directly 200 million children who are ignored below the age of 6. And all of us know how important it is to lay the foundation for the future of them and the country. The third is 5.15, which is the continuous professional development of teachers. And it is related to the first challenge I set, but we will elaborate upon it a little later in scope and opportunities. The fourth one is 5.27, which is very important. And one of your sponsors' tagline is never stop questioning, or never stop students from questioning, if I can put it that way. The fourth challenge, in my opinion, is how to foster student agency, how to involve them, how to make them the partners in learning. So that is the fourth challenge. And the fifth challenge, of course, is which I think is the overarching challenge, how the entire nation can commit to provide quality education to every child in this country, irrespective of the background. And that I phrase as equity and excellence for every child. And only that will ensure the success and sustainability of the society. So these are the 5 challenges that I'm putting on the table right in the beginning, and probably we will discuss later on this as the time goes by. Thank you, Harshal. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashok Pandey, for sharing this opening remark. I'll now request Ms. Rita Singh to share her opening remark on this very crucial subject.
Yeah. Thank you, Harshal, and thank you for this opportunity. Rightly pointed out by Dr. Ashok already, these are the chief points that we find it challenging. Of course, it is we all agree that's a very progressive, the entire framework that has been constituted, the way the policy has been designed, it's absolutely wonderful. The way these elementary classes and the pre-kindergarten years have been included, this is indicator of a right step. It shows that, and we all understand that that is when the maximum cognitive learning and understanding happens, brain development happens. So it is very, very progressive policy. If I have to look at it, we all understand the challenges will be in the method of implementation. And looking at the constitutional provision that we all have, education being in the concurrent list of center as well as state, and with the several interpretations that will probably result in several diversions. I think the implementation will definitely decide the impact. That is why we are all looking ahead or forward to the national curriculum framework, which will soon be out in open. And as far as the challenges are concerned, I think it is going to be a function of the swath of the country that we all are in. It's and how large the country is, how divided the country is, how many boards that we have. So looking at this, if I look at the NEP, yes, it comes up with broad targets. They have been provided. Broad implementation points have also been provided. What probably we could do more, probably we will have to work as an educationists or the people who will be working at the grassroots level. We all have to probably create the roadmap with the proper timeline that has to be probably worked out. That's very important. However, a lot of chapters have that this must be achieved by 2035, 2030, 20, and all those provisions are there. But then intermediate steps and the intervention points and how do we actually check, that is what will, the large segmentation will bring in a whole lot of challenges in the implementation. But like SDG 17 goes, we have to work in a partnership. And if you all work in partnership for these goals, I think we will be able to achieve what NEP 2020 envisions, the way we envision this country. I am almost hopeful, almost sanguine, I should say, that we should be able to achieve that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Rita Singh, for sharing your opening remark. We have also been joined now by General Surendra Kulkarni from Kashmir. I would request my teammate to please. Okay. And we have also been joined by Ms. Divya Lal, founder and managing director from FlipLearn Education. I welcome both our speaker in this panel discussion. Now, I would request Mr. Anirudh Khaitan, Vice Chairman, Khaitan Public School, Ghaziabad, to share his opening remark in about 3 minutes on this crucial subject, New Education Policy 2020.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Harshal, for having me here. And great to hear from the veterans of education, Mr. Pandey, Mrs. Singh. For me, I think I would like to just share 2 stories with you where I would like to redefine the word education. In our country, education is kind of defined by, you've done a college or you've done, PhD, etc. That's how you define education. But, this is my personal stories. When I was with Thailand, I went to Thailand with this friend of mine who was a Indian graduated, did his PhD, etc. We were sitting in a cab and he was having a banana. So he peeled the banana, he ate it, and he opened the window, and he wanted to throw the peel out. And probably that's what we do in our country, or most of us do. And the taxi driver looks behind and says, "Sir, please don't do that. There's a packet under your seat. Please keep it there. I will throw it out later." Who's more educated? I don't know. That's one story I want to share. And the other story I would like to share is of my wife. She does everything on her own. So her mother's so they both lived in the US. She and her mother. Her mother's 80 years old. She does everything by herself. She has to paint something, change a light bulb, small things around the house. Very active. And my wife is exactly the same. We have Christmas at our home. She's making things with her hand. She's doing everything by herself. We've got 4 children. We don't have maids for our children. Only one is there, as opposed to maybe 5 or 6 in other households. And I say, how do you do all this? Where did you learn all this? These skills? She says, you know what? I'm American. So, I think for me, education is not about literacy or numeracy or, yes, skills, etc. are important. But in a country like India, basic education, respect for people, respect for others' work, I think those are the kind of skills that are needed to take the society forward. And those what it is missing. And that is my point of view. If you focus on those, everything else will take care of itself. That is where I come from. So thank you. Just a few short stories on my views on education. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Khaitan. You indeed raised some important points, and we will discuss it and seek opinion from others on the same as well. Before we do that, I request now Dr. M. Mohan, founder, managing trustee, and correspondent, SSVM Institutions, to share her opening remark on this subject in about 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's a very interesting opening, I have to say. According to NEP, their plan is to give 100% gross enrollment ratio. So that itself is a big, quite a challenge. That how are they going to make 100% gross enrollment ratio? Because when you take classes after 5, 6th to 8th, you have 90% dropouts. Then when you take 9th to 10th, you have 79% dropout. And again, when you take 11th to 12th, you have 56% dropout. So out of school children, when you calculate from the age group of 6 to 17, that would be around 32.5 million. So how are they going to make this happen is a quite big challenge. And again, to make this happen, a few challenges which they have to focus on is like improving the facilities of the schools, where they can increase the number of intakes. Then by opening new schools in unserved locations, having effective tracking of dropout and out of school children, by strengthening, because most of the children, they do not know about NIOS, by strengthening open distance and schooling systems. And at the same time, they can create inclusion funds to help poor students. I think these are quite interesting, but at the same time, it's quite challenging, which they have to work on it.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. M. Mohan. Now we are very glad that we have a very senior expert among us, Lieutenant General Surendra Kulkarni, Director, Mayo College Residential, Ajmer. Welcome, Mr. Kulkarni, to this panel discussion. I would request you, sir, to please share your opening remark on this subject. What are your views in about 3 minutes before we take the questions?
Thank you, Harshal, and greetings to my fellow panelists, barring Ms. Mohan, whom I don't know personally. The others are my well-respected colleagues. I will dwell on a couple of thoughts which were not mentioned by them. Firstly, I think as educators, we get mixed up on our role. We are a very small subset of this whole education ecosystem. Making national policy, getting it implemented, making sure it goes to the last village is beyond my charter and purview. So let us allow the policymakers and others to do that. If they ask for our feedback, we should give it, and our inputs can be given. But in our own life, in our own charter, within our limited sphere, what can we do? And in my view, the elements of a shift in the approach in the NEP are things that we can do at our own school or in our schools who associate with us very easily. For example, the shifts in pedagogy, the shifts into vocational training. These are very, very doable things, and you don't have to wait for any enabling ecosystems to come about. Because, as I think Rita mentioned, we are not sure how those ecosystems come about. I worked in the government for long, and I know the entrenched bureaucracies will find many reasons either not to give it the way it's in the policy or to stall it or whatever, for some good reasons and some vested interests. The second thing that we must understand that, like Anirudh gave example of what education should do, in a country with large population like ours, I think the main job of education is to create jobs. If we can create livelihoods, irrespective of the kind of education we have, and just for argument's sake, I mean, Sanjay Gandhi is a very bad example to give, but during the emergency, he had a slogan, each one, teach one kind of thing. If we can provide employment to anything ranging from 3 to 10 people, each of our citizens who's educated can provide employment to 3 to 10 people, then in my view, the success of our society as an educated society will be met. Today happens to be the day the Nobel Prize awards are given. And about 40 years ago, the first Black Nobel was given in economics to Sir Lewis from the West Indies. And his model, his work was mainly centered around how to create employment in large population economies. And there is a phrase which has developed over the thing called the Lewisian curve. That means a point is reached when so-called surplus labor or surplus population can get absorbed into the workforce. And that, for example, a fine example of this is China. You have seen what has happened. They had nothing 50 years ago. See where they have reached now. So therefore, I think we must decide where do we fit into the NEP. And I suspect that by talking about how to get education to the last child in the last village and not allowing the child to drop out, we are entering the domain of politicians. And I don't think it's in our capacity. It's a good thing to talk about. So I think what schools like mine can do who are better endowed is to use the digital capacities that are available today to reach out to schools in far off areas and provide resource materials, provide resource persons, provide opportunities for interaction between children, and thereby creating hubs of excellence in small remote areas, and who have then a cascading effect in their local communities. Thank you.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. Now, after all the heads of different institutes, now it's turn for Ms. Divya Lal, who is from a private organization, and it will be interesting to have her views also. Divya Lal is founder and managing director at FlipLearn Education Limited. Ms. Lal, we would like to understand from you, from that side of the industry, what are your thoughts on the National Education Policy 2020?
Thanks, Harshal. I'm sorry if there's ambient noise. I'm actually transiting at an airport, so apologies for that. I think, first of all, I'm very much synced with what Lieutenant General Kulkarni shared. We have to think of what we can do and our own roles and capacities to enable larger parts of the policy. And they don't need actually an application timeline coming from outside. As an industry service provider, as a person that enables and maybe acts as a catalyst. I think firstly, it's a big tick that we have a new education policy. Second thing, there is in a country as diverse as ours, both economically, socially, in all our living things, I think we need to understand that there is a gradients of adaptation that will happen, and each one of us at different strata will enable that. So as a service provider, what I'm helping schools with today, going online, enabling them with a platform that helps them to impact better learning and teaching, and then to take it to tenets of, the new education policy. Children having as many choice of subjects in grade 11, 12, etc. That doesn't mean every school can actually afford to put 20, 25 teachers for every stream. That will enable guest faculties being shared across schools, being beamed, being looked at, children collaborating at a higher level. So these are all pieces that I believe the industry is also actively looking at, tuning themselves into enabling schools to achieve the vision. I believe in many ways, various schools will adopt various forays in which they would like to adapt this policy, as in the starting first few steps, etc. And then from a larger goal, like we said, 2030, 2035, where all we reach. So I think it's a great news. We have a new policy. There is no change that is not painful. Every change is painful, and it enables us, it shakes us to do things different, whether it is the schools or service providers. And but is everybody up to the task? Yes, very much.
Right.
Harshal, I'll give it back to you, right, when the questions come, and then we can take it from
there. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Lal. Now taking clue from what you said, whenever there is a change, whenever there is something new is being, implemented, there are challenges also. So my next question to the panelists will be on the same point, that the implementation of NEP will be a challenge. Now, how big challenge is this? How easy it will be? How we should all tackle it together? Would like to hear from Dr. Pandey first on this particular question.
Okay, Harshal, thank you very much. I have thoroughly enjoyed the points made by my distinguished panelists. Of course, there is a very famous author and motivational speaker, Zig Ziglar, and he said that if you have any goal and you wish to attain it, the first step is that you write your goal. Now, if you talk in terms of the educational goals for this country, the first step has been taken in the form of this document. But that is not enough, as you rightly pointed it out. Now, we have seen the previous policies, and we have seen their successes, and we have seen their failures. And therefore, the first thing is that we have to learn lessons from that. And then we have to anticipate what could be the hurdles forward. Now, in my opinion, there are 3 or 4 hurdles which come in the policies in general, and that too in a large democracy such as ours. So the first comes from the political angle, and which General Kulkarni has already hinted, the various organs of the politics. But the first organ is that the education is in the concurrent list as you know it, and therefore a bipartisan agreement and making education for the country or political, I think that is a major challenge. And we have seen many of the provisions of policies could not see the light of the day because of this political disagreement. And this time also, this is one of the fears. The second, of course, is the monetary support. The funding is a very, very major issue. 2 or 3 things I will flag it out here. Now we are talking of 3 years to 6 years of education in the foundation years, which was largely out of the ambit which I mentioned in the beginning. Now this number is going to be close to 200 million. Now collection of that data, analysis, need projection, teacher recruitment, their training, material preparation for teaching and learning. I think it is a huge mammoth task, and therefore a very generous funding, public-private partnership, philanthropy, social entrepreneurship, everything has to come into that. So that is the second major hurdle. And third, of course, is the social, what is the social acceptance for some of the things? Are people trying to take shortcuts into it? Will the new paradigm shift that we are talking about, how our classes would be? Will the focus only from cognitive to socio-emotional to personality development, character building? Is it going to be something which people will buy at large, or they will only
Right.
see education in terms of achieving, degrees and diplomas and engineering and medical? So I think these are 2 or 3 very major challenges. But I think the way the whole thing has been documented, the way energy and enthusiasm is being pumped into it, and in the manner in which it is going to be a public policy to be involving the public at large, we will be able to overcome some of those hurdles. Harshal.
Right. Yes, Dr. Pandey, you rightly said every the entire ecosystem, all the stakeholders should, of course, come together when we need to implement the policy. And you also spoke about private players, government stations. So everyone need to come together. And the policy says that the center and states shall work together to increase public investment in education. Also, this is one of the point there, right? They have, if I'm not wrong, they
Right.
have spoke about it. And
They have.
yes. So now this, I'd like to ask this to Director Mayo College. Public investment in education to, if we need to increase it in our education system, how this path can be traveled? What are your views in this when it comes to tie up with private players and increase the number of public investment or private investment in education in Indian system? You are on mute, sir.
Sorry, my apologies.
Yes, sir.
See, first and foremost, you must see the education policy as a vision document and not as a prescriptive
Yes.
booklet. So it envisages that expenditure will go up to what is globally recognized to be a good number, which
Okay,
is
yes.
6%. Currently, we are spending around 4.5%, maximum if you count even the peripheral expenditure on education, which includes all kinds of education all the way up to higher education. Now, since, as Dr. Pandya highlighted, it's a concurrent subject, some expenditure will have to be borne by the states and some expenditure of the investment will have to come from the central government, that is in the government sector. Now, given the state of finances of most of the states, and many of them are dependent on grants from the center for various projects that they have to execute. Some states even have difficulty even in paying out salaries to their employees every month. To genuinely expect that this will be done, even with the best intentions, is a very far-fetched idea. Therefore, we need to involve anybody who's interested to get into education. Now, what has happened is, socially, kind of a stigma has been created that education is some kind of noble, charitable work of society, and therefore no money should be made. Now, anybody who invests in any field expects not to make riches, but at least to expect that they will get a basic return on their investment, that the money spent will generate some more money for which you can invest further to grow that institution. And till such time we get this out of our head that the private and public sector are at loggerheads because the public sector is only for public good and the private sector is only for private selfish interests, I don't think we are going to make any headway, number one. Number two, even today, even in the education sector, there are norms laid down and limits laid down beyond which it is called profiteering. Third thing, the moment we are trying to expand our economy in various fields, we are looking for foreign direct investment, we are looking for flows coming in from all over the world. We are saying we are the destination, come to India. If you are welcoming foreign capital, foreign talent into our country for various things, then why are we reluctant and trying to make it taboo in education. So what we really need is a regulatory framework which meets the societal needs. And I think the government, central and states, should spend their time and effort in preparing and organizing the regulatory frameworks, which are also envisaged in the NEP, rather than getting into this nitty-gritty of whether it is a not-for-profit or profit-making organization. So
Right.
I think if we don't get out of this self-created trap, we are not going to make any worthwhile headway.
True, sir. True. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, I will move to next a different question, and this is for Mr. Khaitan. The policy also spoke about, has written about, a new curriculum design, that is 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, right? Now, you are running one of the major institute in NCR. What are your views on this new design? How significant it will be in laying the foundation, especially for the education?
So I think, if you ask us, I think the system is already kind of working in a very similar structure. It's not like like a new design, right? So the NEP has got a lot of things which are actually irrelevant also when you talk about the new curriculum structure.
Okay.
I will actually focus on that. For example, they say that the medium of instruction should be in the language that the child understands the most, right? I mean, how do you actually even try and execute such a process? For example, so in Delhi, will the child learn in Punjabi or will they learn in Marathi, or will he, it's a melting pot, right? So I think a lot of things in the entire curriculum design where they have said that we will, the good thing is, for example, they have said that we will concentrate on foundation literacy and foundation numeracy. I think that's a very, very big step, because in if the country can achieve the basic levels of foundational literacy and numeracy till whatever age they have taken a target for, then that may benefit the entire ecosystem, right? So, for example, after the NEP, even we have taken it as one of our targets in our institutions to make foundational literacy and numeracy stronger in the whole curriculum design, right? So I think the NEP has a lot of good things that they have mentioned, but we need to really understand how they will implement, right? One thing I really like about what they have done is also they've made that there should be a standard body of assessments. Right now, it's all over the place. I'm a big proponent. I don't like exams that much, but I still think there should be benchmarking done at a class 5 level and a class 8 level, because currently what happens, imagine the entire, if a child goes through the entire education system and he has that one chance in class 12 to prove himself, that one chance. Imagine if and that's when he gets to really know from a countrywide perspective how good, or how is he looked upon. That day he could have a bad day in the morning, he could miss his bus, his mom couldn't have prayed hard enough as the other teacher's parent, as the other child's parent who prayed hard enough to get scores. So I think this is a good step in the NEP, where certain benchmark tests have been suggested over this year. So it's not all about that one exam. One major point I would like to make about the NEP: you can do whatever at the school level. If the whole ecosystem, like even what General Kulkarni was saying, for example, at the college level, if we even change at the school level, but at the college level, if they still look at scores as the most defining factor to take in students, then the NEP will not matter. Whatever they do, however they want to implement, it won't matter, because children will still be looking at scores. For example, in colleges abroad, you have to write an essay. A lot of colleges have said we are not even going to look at SAT scores, right? They look at the child, they don't look at the scores of the children, right? for us to do any kind of, overhauling of the system, the entire ecosystem have to understand. Colleges will should start asking kids that, listen, I want your portfolio. Write an essay for us. What all did you achieve? What are the extracurricular activities have you done in school? I don't want to see your scores. If you pass, that is good enough for us. So so my personal viewpoint is that, is the entire ecosystem even ready to accept such a change? We can keep, saying that we'll do this and we'll do that. So this is the question I put to all the panelists. That what do you think, that till this doesn't happen, how do we really shift our entire thought process towards that?
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Khaitan. Thank you so much. Now, coming to Dr. A. Mohan, you heard all the panelists. What are your views on the public investment and the new design in the national education policy? And I'll also like to request you if you can also share some challenges while implementing the policy. Dr. A. Mohan.
Yeah, like
You're on mute.
to say, yeah. To say very frankly, NEP, it is how we see it. If you see it, it's not going to be a task which is not going to be very successful. Then, of course, it is on all the stakeholders how we think. Because most of us, what we do is we like to do what we think only. Not how we have to think. So many things are there now. The scenario of teaching is changing. Because when you take during my mother's period, my mom used to say she learned Hindi during her schooling. But now we down south, we don't learn Hindi. It's like whoever wishes only they learn. And at the same time, to be very frank, like when you take my dad, all he used to say, like until 5th standard we didn't learn ABCD, but still they had a good language. They were very good in English. So this is all the skill which they developed step by step. So when they were in 6th standard, they started learning alphabets, and slowly they progressed. When they came to 10th standard, they said that is where when we started reading English sentences. But we were very clear, we were very matured enough to understand the grammatical pattern, how the language goes, how the literature goes. So when we completed our 12th standard and we entered a college, when the college we entered, wherever we entered, it had high English standards. So we were able to cope up in writing an essay also. But in today's scenario, if you take the skills are missing. A graduate from BE computer science, when they apply for a job, basically they don't know typing. So where is the skill gone? So this is what NEP is working hard to bring back. So all the practical knowledge which has to apply in our real life is lost. And for that, they are working on it. And again, when you take private investments, see, as and how I think Pandey sir also told, we have to incorporate private schools with government schools, so they can adopt one neighborhood school. So in such a way, whatever facilities the private school has, they can share it with the government school children, and they can develop them in all areas. So it is not that only a particular individual has to do. It is again left up to the stakeholders how we see it positively and how we make this happen.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohan. Since two of our panelists have spoken about the regional languages and the language barriers, I would like to ask this to Ms. Rita Singh, that NEP actually, if we talk about one of the challenges, NEP has not mentioned much about, the students. Their parents are who have transferable jobs, right? They are living in Delhi and suddenly moving to Bangalore and then to some other part of the country. So NEP doesn't say anything specific on children of parents with transferable jobs. Is it really a big challenge and should be addressed? Ms. Rita Singh, what are your opinion on this?
Harshal, if I expect these kind of minute details from a policy, then I think expecting too much from a policy or from policy makers, it won't be fair on them. So these are a
Yes.
very minute. I'm sure even the schools which ones, Kendriya Vidyalayas and Navodyas, or the army schools which were set up to cater for all those officials who are in transferable jobs. If I look at specifically those schools, even they in their policies wouldn't have worked out like this. How would a school actually teach a student who's
Right.
traveled from Chennai to Jammu? Very honestly. So I think expecting this in a policy
Right.
is asking for too much. Having said that, I do take that point, and I do understand Anirudh's concern also that how do you actually, what subject do you teach in? Medium do you teach in? It's not about choosing Punjabi or whatever Telugu or this or that. It's about imparting or trying to impart that differentiated or the individualized learning or teaching to the child. This is what let's understand the spirit behind the policy and then bring in the implementation. Yes, further implementation rules will come in. We will have NCF in place. Then we will have probably our hoping that Department of Education of states will come with certain rules or whatever guidelines. But the fact is, I think Ajal Kulkarni very beautifully brought out that the action points are to be here. And if I look at few points in the NAP, we don't really have to wait to kind of implement or start working on the certain points. Anirudh also talked about those benchmarking years. So if I look at it, if I'm expecting a benchmarking exam at say after grade 3 and grade 5, grade 8, grade 12 or whatever, so it automatically I know in my 21-22 session, I have to have my coordinators of the school who will be looking after from kindergarten years to stage 2, or I should call it class 2. So I know that this is how I will what do I say? Separate my section in the school. I will definitely have in class 3, I'll also have a mother teacher, which I was not having. Why? Because I see that a child will be going through a benchmarking exam at the end of the year. So there has to be a pastoral or a focused teacher to those children. So there are certain action points, though they have not been worded by any board or anybody, I can see that coming. So there are certain changes I have already done for 21, 22. So mother teacher concept, these are all small on ground implementation points which we can foresee and implement. When I say Hindi or English or whatever, it is basically what the child understands best in. Whichever city we are in, if you are in Ghaziabad, probably Hindi would be very comfortable to 90-95% of the students. For those 5%, we can have that one-on-one sessions or one-on-pair. You have more integration with parents. And if it's a child from Kerala who's moved into your classroom, and then if you could excuse his say Hindi lessons can be brought down in the level. I mean, there are a whole lot of things that we can work at our own level. When we have like our school happens to have a whole lot of people who are working in embassies or who are working in ministries, who are probably working on deputation abroad, and they've come in. So there's no Hindi that they've studied for last 3 years or so. What do? I've worked down the curriculum for that particular child in that particular. But then he has to pick up for those lost 3 years. Not in 3 years, but he has to do it in 1 year. So I think all those small things that we can work at our own level, if we really want to, when we understand the spirit of the policy or the thought behind, if you look at, I'm already very, very positive about the fact that they're looking at schools as the what do I call it? The word they have used is Samajik Chetna Kendra. So if it is being looked at as Samajik Chetra Kendra, I think we have already we're already somewhere in the eyes of the society. We're already up there. So I think I see a whole lot of Dr. Ashok also talked about partnerships. There is already what they proposed is a twinning system, pairing system of a public and a private. I see a lot of hope if all those progressive schools, I know the heads who are there in the panel, I know them personally, and they've already worked in these kinds of spheres. There's been British Council programs in which we were with the KGBV schools in Bulandshahr and things like that. So haven't we already done that twinning? So if you look at the progressive schools, this policy seems to be cliched or already there. But the fact is, it's all about scalability. It's all about getting down to the grassroots level. It's all about all those best practices which were already prevalent or being done in the schools like ours. How does this benefit the last citizen of or last child of the country? I think that is where the challenge is. So yes, my jurisdiction, if happens to be in the Appam group of institutions, if I do whatever in my 6 schools and I'd stop there, probably I would be wasting my talent or learning or experience. I must step up and go beyond. I must have my impact reaching larger. So even if a Directorate of Education or DIS does not write a letter to me that, okay, take over this village or do that, I must keep doing it as an educator in partnership with any NGO in partnership. There is a much more to this NEP. I think it gives a lot of, it kind of turns our face to the side where all the educators should be looking at. This is how I see it. Sorry.
Right. Thank you so much, Ms. Rita Singh, for those inputs. So do we have Dr. Pandey with us? We have his camera is off. Yes, he's there. Dr. Pandey, National Research Foundation, establishment of such institute has also been mentioned in the National Education Policy. I will ask this question to make the Indian education system stronger. We all know the fund which is spent in research in India is comparatively low, right? If we compare it from Western countries. How this step will affect the Indian education system?
Yes, so what I would say here is, it has been recognized now. First of all, this recognition was not there. Of course, I'm not saying that there were no funds available for research, but having a corpus and having this recognition, I think this itself will fuel the entire innovation and research process in the country. And in the last 8 to 9 months, this particular need has been further accentuated. You see, I mean, let us not forget that we are in the forefront, along with 7 or 6 more countries, to produce the first vaccine for COVID-19. So I think I will only take it at this point as a very cautious approach will be mine, that recognition is very good and the funding will be there. But let me tell you, if funding is not there, then it will be a disaster for the country. General Kulkarni has already said, you see, that this policy is talking about 6%. And let me add here with a little bit of disappointment that 6% of GDP on education was requested 30 years, 40 years back also. And we have not been able to put in. And that is why in my opening remark, I said funding and this support budgetary allocation is going to be a major challenge. And I think the government, with all its intent, I'm sure government is very, very clear about it, very sure about it, and they will have to do it. There is no way out.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Pandey. General Kulkarni, I'll request you to comment on this. And also one more question for General Kulkarni, that, opening up higher education to foreign players, how that step will also affect the higher education sector. If you can please comment on this, General Kulkarni.
Yeah. Thank you. First, about the issue of research, and Dr. Pandey has very succinctly put out some key issues. But please remember, the issue of research is not only linked to funding. The issue of research is also linked to the very system of education we want to establish. So we want to shift from rote learning to a type of learning now at the school level or young level. You won't call research as some cutting edge research, but the spirit of inquiry has to be released into the system. And the entire way a child grows up has to be research oriented, because in time to come, and given the fact that, as I say always, we are a high population country, if you don't come up with something new, if you don't come up with something which can be universally used, if you don't come up with something which is affordable, then you are not going to progress as a society. And let me tell you, this whole idea of a lifelong learner, which is now nearly 50 years old as an idea, is more relevant today, because earlier you could prepare for one career path. Today students need to prepare for jobs which they will either change voluntarily, or those jobs will vanish and new jobs will get created. So creation of knowledge, creation of innovation is the crux. So a research orientation of a child is absolutely essential. And let me just take your mind back. This policy is an evolutionary one. Everyone talks of the 86 policy, but about 10 years later, there was an international commission called the Delors Commission, named after the head of the European Commission. And for not many in India know that Dr. Karan Singh of India was a member of that very high blue ribbon commission, so to speak. And they came up with 4 pillars of education in that report. I mean, the report's very long. But they say it talks about learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. So all the things that we talk about today, experiential learning, working for the community, etc., these were established as 4 pillars of education as an by an international blue ribbon commission. And therefore, I think that the NEP is only bringing us into alignment with where we should have been. And one last point about what Dr. Pandey said, this 6% was to be around for many years. Malaysia, South Korea implemented it donkeys years ago. You see the impact of it. So not only we need to put 6% now, and we are below that, all the lost years also may need to be caught up if you have to make any significant progress. And either the government has large surpluses to provide it, or you need to look for money elsewhere. The answer is very obvious, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The impact on higher education about bringing in people from outside. Yes, we are living in a global world. Just give me a minute. We're living in a global world, and therefore it doesn't matter from where you get your education. You are wanting your people to go and head companies all over the world as CEOs. What did they do? Most of them got their higher education abroad. So I think if you're truly looking at a global world, then it doesn't matter where you get the education from. And if those people come here and don't provide the same high quality, if you bring a branch of Harvard here, and if their delivery here is substandard, well, you will not go to that thing. Initially, you may get attracted by their name, but over a period of time, they need to be credible. Today, it is well established, and especially in the Middle East and other places, you will find it's very common to find campuses of international universities being established there. Even Indian universities like BITS have campuses abroad. So I don't think we should worry about this great geographical divide at all. We should worry about the quality of delivery. That's all.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, very interesting inputs have been shared by Dr. Pandey and you. Now we would like to close the session on a positive note. And there are, of course, new education policy. Probably it has come late, but then it has some very relevant points. And if implemented properly across the states, it will definitely impact the Indian education sector and benefit it. Now, starting with Dr. A. Mohan, I would request you, what new opportunities NEP will bring for students? And while answering this question, I'll also request you to have your closing remark. I'll have the closing remark and answer to this question from all the panelists, and then we will formally close the session. Dr.
Though NEP's effective implementation, the learners will develop knowledge of human culture and the natural world. That is one. And next is they will have a broad knowledge of multiple disciplines. For example, if they are going to choose a subject, they will have in-depth knowledge of that subject. a different approach to the learning they will surely have, and an ability to apply knowledge and skills in the real life. This is what NEP is aiming for the students. And of course, if NEP is going to be a successful one, 100% the part of the teacher's role is also very important, where the teachers educational institution should also redesign their educational pattern for the need of the NEP program. And at the same time, we should also open up a very what to say attractive feature for the outstanding students to enter B.Ed colleges, because today's trend, if you see, the outstanding students take up different professions, and they don't turn up towards teaching. So the last left take up no other way teaching, and they come. But in this regard, the government has to focus for an attractive scholarship for the outstanding students, where they will become the teachers, and they will come out with very creative teaching methodologies, where students can really apply things to their real life and be successful. So with this, I always think that NEP will be a challenging part, but I'm very sure by 2030, this will be on 100% implementation based on the stakeholders' hard work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. M. Mohan. Moving to Mr. Khaitan now. Your closing remark, Mr. Khaitan, and one more question. How can we create a pool of trained teacher? That is something I'd like to seek your opinion on, along with your closing remark.
So, thank you so much.
You are mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible. Yeah, you're audible, sir.
Yeah. So I think there are few steps if you want to create a pool of trained teachers. We don't ask this about any other industry, right? It's funny. There's hospitality, there's medical. Why aren't we asking, how do we create a pool of trained managers in hospitality, or how do we create a pool of trained nurses in the hospital industry? And I feel there are two things that needs to be done. Number one, the profession of teaching has to be looked upon as a profession of choice. People who are getting 90% and plus, the top students should opt for teaching. So the government has to do a huge PR campaign around getting the best people into teaching. Right now, unfortunately, it's still one of those, last things that you want to do, which is teaching. Not like a Finland, where people actually probably get 10 applications for one post of a teacher. Here, you get hardly, whatever the numbers are. So first, you need to glorify the teaching profession. I also feel today there is enough that at least I can speak about the schools and my partner schools and my network schools in our network. I think teacher pay has come to a very good level, at least a decent level. I would not say good. Those are very subjective, but at a decent level. So that part is taken care of. And third, which we have been talking about, if you want a pool of trained teachers, you've got to have professional bodies come in and run these institutions. The government can do it on their own, but if you actually let private players come in to this entire scheme of into this education space, they will put processes and systems to ensure teaching is happening, because competition will increase. You want to be better than the next person, you'll have to train your people. That is what happens in every industry. It's a self, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. More people will come, you'll have to get better. So you'll have to train your teachers. That's one.
Right.
What the government can do, in fact, and this is, of course, as Mr. Kulkarni says, we are no one to tell to tell the government what to do, but they can have some sort of exam, which may not be mandatory right now, for the teachers, that they can take, every 2 years and 3 years to build their own capacity, which could give them, which could upskill themselves and say that, listen, now right now it's a TGT, a PGT, a PRT, etc. But you can sort of now go to a school and say, listen, I have passed this exam, which is like a government exam, you know, and I'm X level now, right? Which could make you more employable, get you more money in the market, etc. So these are my few thoughts on teacher training, etc. Yeah, but first you've got to glorify the teaching. I think, honestly, salute to all the teachers out there. It's a tough profession, and I think we need to really focus on glorifying it as a profession of choice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khaitan. Over to you, Ms. Rita Singh, for your closing remark.
Continuing with what Anirudh was saying, I'll just speak a little about the teacher education. I think with this 4-year B.Ed program coming into scene, and they also talking about specialization as niche as education for gifted children and things like that. And if I look at the proposal that they have talked about related to professional standards for teachers, setting up of national professional standards for teachers and all those things, I think we are already there. The policy has kind of looked into it. So I'm hopeful that firstly, the standards that we expect from teacher, the moment there is a laid down standards or the indicators and things like that, there's already a benchmarking. Even if your school does not do it for you, you do it for yourself, and you know that things will fall in place, and if you really want them to fall in place, so at least that the grid is there. I remember, I really do not recollect which speaker it was, but then we were all talking about it. How do we actually achieve what we want to achieve and things like that? And I think Anirudh was talking about those sad situation when you travel and you see that educated people not really working as behaving as educated children or people. You realize that there are certain things like this, developing right culture or developing right habits or value education that we talk about. We can say that they have to be emulated and they have to be picked up and they have to be gradually brought in. But I feel at times there is a focused endeavor towards it, and when you create parameters, when you create actual action plans, they may seem like unplanned thing, matter of fact happening around your environment. However, you plan it, you decide that these are the points or these are the action points which will result in this kind of outcome, and you actually do it. So if I look at the NEP, I think they have brought in whole lot of a teacher profession has really is in the process of being put on the pedestal. So we are reaching there. So with the hope, I say bye-bye to everybody.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Singh. Over to you, General Kulkarni, for your closing remark.
You're on mute.
Hello. Over to
Just
you.
one sentence. Yeah, just one sentence. The main positive I see in the policy is this, that there is recognition that education is much more than plain academics. And the point that Anirudh had made at the beginning, that if you just go by your scores, then that's no education. And I think the policy recognizes it very well. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Dr. Pandey, your closing remark, please.
Yes, I'll be very brief. You are already getting bullied for closing the session, Harshal. So let me only say that Rita in the beginning mentioned about SDGs. It is very close to my heart. I'm glad the policy has talked about integration of sustainable developmental goals as a value proposition in our curriculum. Second is holistic education. Everybody has talked about it. And third is parental engagement will have a new meaning in the new scheme of things. And the last thing, Harshal, I would say that all those who have some doubts about the implementation and the roadmap ahead, I'll advise them to read the last paragraph in the policy, which is about implementation only, para 27, 1, 2, 3. And the policy has laid out 6 steps in which the implementation will take place, taking care of all the hurdles. And I'm sure the policymakers are very much aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandey, and I thank all the panelists. Dr. Ravi Gupta, Editor-in-Chief at Elite Sector Media, is also on the screen. I would request my team to please present the certificates to our esteemed speakers and panelists. Thank you so much, Divya Lal. She has left. She was in transit, founder and managing director of FlipLearn Education, for joining us today. Next certificate, Ms. Rita Singh, Director, Indirapuram Group of Institutions, Ghaziabad.
Thank you.
Mr. Aniruddh Khaitan, Vice Chairman, Khaitan Public School, Ghaziabad. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
Dr. Ashok Pandey, Director, Alcon Group of Schools, New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. Thank you.
Lieutenant General Surendra Kulkarni, retired, Director, Mayo College, Residential, Ajmer. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your opinion on this platform.
Thank you very much.
Dr. M. Mohan, Founder, Managing Trustee and Correspondent, SSVM Institutions, Mettupalayam. Thank you so much. Thank you all the panelists for joining us. We close this session formally here as we prepare for the next session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.